Okay, we like to put a little music at the beginning just to set the mood, right? Um, First, I just want to do a quick kind of like centering um, practice. And so, if everybody can just take a deep breath, this is more for me than probably anybody else, right? But it's good for us all to kind of get on the same page before we start to dive into some important stuff. So, everybody just takes a deep breath, close their eyes, relax, open your eyes, take a look around. There's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people here who want to do good. And I just want to acknowledge that. And that, whatever is said in presentations, whatever's going on, we just have to recognize that intention that we want to do good things to this planet. And that's what we have to do at this point. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And it all needs to come from the heart. That's really important to remember in your pursuits of everything and all the issues that come up. We're going to go over our story a little bit in a minute, but we want to make an offering to the community before we do that and just express the importance of giving and making sure that we continue to do that throughout our processes in this industry, in our lives, and kind of the whole picture. So last year, some of you were here. I look around, and there's a lot of great people here. There's a lot of people that weren't here last year. But we do this. We give away. Each one of these vials has a couple of seeds. And they're seeds from our stock. And so they're really powerful to us. They're our journey. They're our expression of love. And so we want to share that with everybody in some way. And all the people here have chosen to be here for a reason. And so you all deserve to have something to bring to your garden that connects us all. So we're going to connect everybody with these seeds. And we ask that if you're not really capable of growing, there might not be enough for every single person to get a vial. If you're not growing this year, let somebody who thinks they are gonna be. If you don't have that, we have some cool patches that you can take instead. So we're gonna pass these around. As these things are going around, we're gonna introduce ourselves and kind of give you a little background for those of you who don't know. So yeah, thank you for coming. It's really important that we're here. It's really important that we're exploring these topics and these issues and that we're trying new things. With that, I'm going to it's me. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what brought me here. I want to kind of go over just like some of the important factors that have led me on, say, the regenerative path, you could say, and what that is. What we really want to do is start defining these terms that we're utilizing and making sure that they're being used in the right places. And so the thing that comes to my mind, I think of what was the biggest influence to make you want to do good things for the planet. And it's nature. And I was born in a very natural spot. I thought I was a fisherman for the first 6 years of my life, and so that influenced me really heavily for a long time. I grew up on a fishing resort out in the wilderness in northern Minnesota. And that's where like all these important connections come, and I can't express enough to people with kids or to make sure that kids have that space, that freedom, that ability to connect with the natural world, to make mistakes by themselves, to not always be watched and concerned about. We have to do that. That came up. I was talking to people yesterday, and that's valuable. I think about what's so valuable. What do I think about? And I think about my time out there. I think about how that drove me to fall in love with life. And it was the natural world and my family and all that comes with that, but really it's that freedom that we feel when we're free in nature. And we have to try and hold on to that in this day and age. And it's weirder now than it ever has been. but that world is still there, and that's important to remember. So fishing resort, big influence, northern Minnesota, um, got me going the right way. Moved to Colorado, mountains, influence, big. Couldn't believe my eyes. I remember I was like 6 years old, kind of sick at the time, been through a lot. It's interesting, I was super sick when I was young, to the point of living in an oxygen tent for a while and, um, you know, facing death or wondering why everybody was so concerned. Pulled through, obviously, but that had an effect on things. And so Colorado is the mountains, and I explored those and was given a lot of freedom by my parents, and I thank my mother, um, and she probably is listening right now, um, somewhere, listening to the energy of the world. Um, but she let us do what my brother and I were free. I mean, before we could drive, she would drop us off at trailheads, and a week later pick us up. And we lived under tarps and cooked over fires at that age. And we didn't really know what we were doing, but I think that's kind of one of the best ways to learn. You get the basics and make sure you're not going to die, and then you come out of the experience much richer. And so, sitting next to a fire, dealing with your thoughts, growing up, um, catching fish, catching food, that is the essence that creates the drive to want to do good things for our planet, and freedom and liberation, the feeling of being free is what's going to create intention, that will help us do whatever we can to make that happen for others. And so yeah, people are like, how do you make it all work? It's like, well, it all works. It's like, how do we not get in the way so much that it doesn't anymore? And really, right now, it's like, how do we heal the problems that have been created? And so that's where I think regenerative is really an important name. But college was just an extension of all that love. Everything was an extension of that love. I just moved in the direction of wanting to be outside all the time, and I did. And I spent decades. And post-college, the classic story. I gave everything away and walked around with a little backpack, and I lived out of that backpack for over 10 years. I still have the backpack. It's kind of a special thing. Life has evolved really rapidly in the last 5 years. Things are definitely I'm in a different reality, and that's the one thing. Once you have passion and drive, manifestation of what you want can start to occur faster than you could ever imagine. The truth is, anybody can do it, and anytime we think that we're served a situation that makes it impossible to do that, and I can't do it because I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, so many important figures have shown us that you can rise out of nothing and become everything that you could ever imagine. So I just encourage people to, when you're feeling down or I don't know what I'm doing and this is hard and I feel like I'm doing a lot of things wrong, and it's like you can't focus on what's not working, and you can't focus on the faults. You can't fight. You have to start acknowledging what's working, even if it's not that much. It's all about paying attention to what's working, and it's all about finding connection and resonating with others and resonating with other messages and paying attention to what you believe in. So, it's like if you hear something and you're like, yeah, that's a sign that that's good, move that direction. And I can't tell you, it's not like we're in this position out of some kind of big fortune that we started from. It was really the opposite. And And those stories are always generally the most potent and important to listen to, because it gives us all hope that you can do it, and you don't have to feel. But like I said, it's a lot of work to do right now. And just finding yourself in this world and what you love and what your passion is hard, you know, and it's complex. Um, so, but then, so I gave back for years. During that time when I was living out of the backpack, the work that I did was take kids out into the wilderness and show them. And so it was like service for a decade of just like, it was kids, it was older people, and it involved climbing, it involved, kayaking, it involved all these things that you do in nature that are recreation. And I loved all that, and loved that it was connecting people to nature, and that was giving me a chance to give people these opportunities and to give back, because I felt like so many people when I was young gave me a lot in the realm of wilderness. Um, and so that was an important piece of my life there. But something was missing. It didn't feel full. I always knew something was wrong. I didn't know how to grow food. I spent more time learning how to gather food and learning the woods and all that. But I didn't know how it all worked. And so that kind of drove me in a new path. Call it your Saturn returns. I was probably in my late 20s. And I started growing then. So I didn't even plant a seed till I was like 27 years old. So I don't have that much experience. So many people have so many more years of experience growing things that I don't claim to be some kind of, been doing this for so long and all this, I have all this wisdom on it. It's just, it really is more about, it's not really about growing. It's just about caring. It's about wanting to do something good. And so it drives an ethic to not participate in the ways of agriculture. So I started growing my own food and started projects. That's where, in Prescott, Arizona, that's where I met Elizabeth, and we kind of teamed up. And I'm telling you, the team, being a couple, a lot more is doable, and a lot more is possible. And having Elizabeth on this journey has definitely strengthened the path and what we're capable of doing. So that's, we met in Prescott while I was running this thing I called the Prescott Food Revolution. I was writing, newsletters every month to try and spread awareness and information about how to manage your space into a food place, or let somebody else who's super excited about it, because there's all this energy. We were all running around growing vegetables in other people's yards, living in tents, and like people let us do things because we were doing good things for them. And I really believe you got to do a lot for the community before you can expect to karmically be successful in any kind of scene of any sort. So if you haven't put your time in, then start putting your time in. And you might notice things work better. It's just kind of this weird thing that happens with the whole spiritual side of existence that can't be explained by science, and the magic of, this isn't supposed to work like this, but it does when you believe. And that's truth. And, I spent a lot of time in my journeys, indigenous peoples, and seeing the power of the belief of how you can transform the negative energies, even in something from such a negative place. And so, again, I just, I encourage you guys to work on your karma. It helps. And we're all here because we probably have done some good stuff, because we all want to listen and sit in a room and talk about living soils for days. So, everybody's on the right path. And I just encourage you all to keep moving forward with that, and to keep the gratitude high, and to keep the greed and the fear away, and make sure that you can do what you love instead of find yourself getting funneled into something that's all of a sudden not what you love anymore. And I don't want to live in this life without that feeling of love. So I'm not, this whole the business side, because we are an OLCC licensed rec farm. I don't really like the term recreation. I wish we would all just kind of drop that and just, adult use. I don't even know. It's just like whatever it is. We went through all that and got that. But the growing food, and some of you have heard some of this, but it's good for people that haven't, just because the backstories on why people are where they're at is really important. And so I learned some things. I never worked on a farm. I am not educated outside of my own research on any kind of horticultural oversight farm. I've never been exposed to working I've never been excited about bigger scale farming. From the beginning, I was just like, I'm not doing that. I want to grow food, but I don't want to do that. I can see what that does, and I don't think it's good. It doesn't seem like it's a good way to do it. And so I just followed my own path and had people that along the way. And thank God to all the people that have put their time in. Bill Mollison, these permaculture people are super valuable, important, have put a lot of time in. It's a good resource for people who are curious and wanting to learn. Jeff Lawton, an understudy of him, these people help us understand what we need to do. And so I just plowed through and started growing. I didn't have any, I had everything without anything. It's kind of like, those are the times of my life when I maybe talk to my grandkids and I'm like, back when I didn't have anything, I was the freest I'd ever been. It's the lessons that we probably all are going to learn and think about. But that whole drive of wanting to grow my own food turned into growing a lot of food, learning alternative ways. I learned that if you just bury carbon, everything seems to work. We were growing veggies bigger than people were comfortable buying, thinking we must have put a bunch of stuff in there, and all we did was bury some straw and grow on top of it with some compost. And in the beginning, I used some guano at times, but I have since, for a long time, let it all go. I'm not. You can do it without that. I was like, wait, there's these other things that help us understand that actually all those nutrients that we think we need to buy are growing right outside this door. And if we just manage those things better than we have been, we can make more and more of it, and it just keeps getting better. So, our whole message and our whole pursuit in this process has been like, learn how it all works. We have the most access to information than we've ever had. So you can be curious about something and learn about it through research papers and whatever with a phone. There's no excuse anymore. You can educate yourself faster than you've ever. And that's why I have hope and think that we can accelerate this movement so quickly because of the access to information that we have. And we got to take advantage of it because it's here and we have that technology. So that's really important. And so, we ended up in Southern Oregon in 2011, just kind of bumming around, staying at a place, living under a tarp. We called it the Madrone. Had a recliner under it. It was pretty sweet. That was a birthday present from my lovely wife. We drug a recliner to this spot. A lazy boy, so I could drink my coffee while I was. But yeah, main point is it's nature. We need to reconnect, and I'll talk about that more. I'm gonna let Elizabeth give a little background story on her, and I'll hand it over.
Hello, everybody. Bear with me, I'm really nervous, you guys. I don't get off the farm so much. I'm pretty introverted, so this is incredibly intimidating. So I'm doing my best. But, oh, thank you. So I'd say, I guess my story is similar. I think everybody can connect with that. As like a child, you're just drawn to nature. And I grew up in the suburbs, just the suburban sprawl. Not My parents aren't farmers. My parents were business people, and my mom's a stay-at-home mom. And but we had this great backyard, and there was like a little pond back there, and I was just obsessed. I would go back there and spend so much time just like poking in the water and like, getting frogs and snakes and lizards and turtles and bringing it all in the house and probably shortening my mother's lifespan with escaped snakes but it was that childhood fascination that was the seed. And I knew, even though I wasn't surrounded by it, and all the influence that surrounded me was pushing me towards, you know, getting a degree and getting a career and having a stable life and having a lot of, having babies young. I'm not saying that's bad, but just like this path that seemed like pre-written. And I didn't want it. I knew, I just felt it inside, just followed that drive for nature. And I was really drawn to Oregon, actually. Right from there, I went to Oregon out of high school, and I went to school in Portland for a little bit. And then I got into firefighting, and I fought fire for years. And that actually was a really great experience, because you spend a lot of time outside and you're physically working and you're using your body and its service. I think there's a lot of issues with the way we fight fire. It's really resource intensive, and that's a whole wormhole there. But ultimately, I was sleeping out under the stars, and I loved it, and I knew that's what I wanted. And from there, I ended up down in Prescott, and I met Nikolass, and I stopped firefighting because it really hurt my body and I got sick. And we were eating really, really bad food, eating MREs, just like this toxic, preservative-soaked food. And I was young and I was sick and it felt terrible. And I knew something was wrong. And so it pushed me towards, so then I was wanting to work on a farm because I had all this physical energy that I wanted to use. And it was like, it totally changed my life just to start growing food. It really started there. Like, it was all centered around feeding yourself. And then the feeling of growing food and eating the food that you've grown was one of the most healing, incredible feelings. And it was like no turning back at that point. So, started growing food, worked on farms, and then I got to know Nikolass, who was just like riding around on a bike around town with like veggies in a cart, just like crazy. It was so crazy. You'd just like see him, just like all around town with his little cart and vegetables sticking out of everywhere. I was like, I want that. That looks great. And so, yeah. So I worked with Nikolass, and then it was like the path of just growing food, and we just like went up the West Coast, just left a trail of gardens up the West Coast, trying to find places where we could have access to land and grow food. And then we ended up here. And we ended up with this piece of land that we get to have. And it's incredible. I can't believe it. I didn't fathom that it would happen. And I knew I wanted it. I knew I would love to have a piece of land that I could like freely express myself on, ourselves on. And I didn't think it was going to happen. I accepted that it wouldn't happen. And so we designed our lives around just like making it happen wherever we could, in people's backyards or wherever. And so when it's all kind of clicked in and we have this spot, it's just like so much thankfulness and recognition of the privilege that we get to be there. And and so that's kind of the basis of where it's come from, is food and just following intuition and good intuition, and it manifested, and it's unbelievable. So I still can't believe, and I can't even believe it. And I'm so so thankful that everybody is here and that this event is happening. It's unreal. I love it. Thank the, the powers that be, that we're all here and we all care, and it gives me so much hope because it's a really crazy world right now, and there's a lot of stuff going on that beats you down, and yeah, so I'm really thankful everybody's here. I'm so stoked to have this opportunity, and yeah, that's where we're at. So with that, so now I guess let's start talking about some more tangible things. Yeah. So a huge piece of our system is our animals, actually. We keep a diverse herd of livestock, and it's been evolving over the years. It was we started with chickens, and I think that anyone who's like wanting to get into keeping animals, start with chickens. Like start small. Start with a bunny. Start with chickens. Start with something simple. Don't jump right into like a big ruminant or a pig, because they're intense. The bigger they get, the more intense, the more care that you need to give them, and so with chickens, they're just an incredible creature. They do so much work. They're amazing composters. They're really self-sufficient. They're incredible healers. They're really hardy, and you can do so much with chickens, and pretty low maintenance. You can easily have someone take care of them for you, and so that's where we started, was with chickens, and then we added some ducks and we added some turkeys, and you get the diversity of the poultry, and then I got into goats, and I'm very much a goat person. I love the goat energy. And then once you're that deep in, it's just like, and we added some sheep, then we had some donkeys, then we had some llamas, and now just this last spring, just last couple months, we added a cow, and it's just like been incredible. Cows are amazing. They're just these beautiful beings that just emote this motherly giving vibe. It's unbelievable, and they just love to be loved. They just love to be touched and to be milked. They are the mother, and so that's been really actually life-changing. Adding the cow this year, it's like I can't imagine life without a cow now. So, yeah, and so we have this diverse group of animals, and we keep them all together. They're all mixed together. They all live together, and it's really awesome. They totally, I guess I want to back up for a sec. As you're building these systems, I think it's really important, like I said, to start small. Because if you like jump right in and you don't have a system set up, it can be, you can just run into some really intense experiences, and it's going to be intense. Like keeping animals is not just like Snow White and the butterflies flitting around everywhere. It's intense. Like you deal with death, and you deal with sickness, and you deal with injury, and you deal with all that, and it's, I think, a really incredible experience to give yourself to that and totally sink into it and feel it, and be there for the birth and be there for the death and be there for all that full cycle process. And so I think easing yourself into it, you get the lessons, and you start to learn, and every year is different. Every year I'm learning, it's new things every year. Things happen that you are just like, what am I gonna do about this? And so building up, I think, is good. Easing yourself into it, and so the system that we created with the animals right now is we have a nice sized barn, which really helps, and we have the ability to basically with gates and panels, having the ability to separate animals if you need to is super valuable. And so we're really lucky to have this great barn and these panels. And so if you're having all these animals mixed together, it's super valuable to have the option to separate them if you need to, and it comes up. And so we keep them all in the barn, and they all poop together. and it mixes all the poop, just them milling about, it's just already pre-mixed into this great medium. And let's see. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right now, okay. So then, yes, we have them in the barn right now for a reason, which is we're not locking them in the barn. Basically, we have them in this barn co-mingling, and then we have this. It's about a 1/2 to 3/4 acre, what we call sacrifice pasture. Not because we're sacrificing to the pagan gods or something, but it's because you sacrifice the health of the land because it's overtrodden with animals. That land can't be healthy with the amount of animals that are there. If you confine an animal to a space, for most of its, if it's living in a small space, it's going to ruin. It's going to degrade the land. It's not going to be healthy because it's going to be compacted and overgrazed. And so, but there's a usefulness to creating that scenario if you want to do intensive soil building. And so we keep them with the sacrifice yard, and it's nice to have that. You need that space so that all these animals that do have these factions of community need to have the option to take space. And so the sheep need to be able to separate themselves from everyone and be sheep over here, and the donkey needs to be able to get away and be a donkey over there. But they come and commingle in the barn, and they all eat together in the barn. And then from there, I mean, the grand plan, the grand scheme, the ideal scenario is that from that, you then channel them into a rotational pasture system. And so that's definitely our end goal, but that's going to be a long road for us just because it's a fencing extravaganza. And fencing is the key to successful, easy animal husbandry if you're trying to do an integrated, intensive system. Good fencing saves you a lot of headache and worry. So that's our journey right now, is planning out these pastures that we're going to rotate them through. And but right now, since we've only been on our land for a year and 3 months, so brand new. It's brand new to us. We need this soil. We need intensive soil building right now, so that we can build up the fertility of the ground that was really degraded when we got there. We'll talk more about that. But and so for our system right now, it works fantastic. To let's see, do I have this? Okay, here's some of them. There they are. Some sheep, llama. That was the first goat that I got. Her name's Selah. She's wonderful. Some bunnies. And so what we do, I'm gonna see if I got that's the barn right there. And then one of the key pieces to our system right now is sourcing hay. And that's the main thing that we bring into our farm. That's buying hay to feed the animals. And so sourcing the hay is a really important piece of that process, and making sure that hay is clean and not being sprayed with herbicides and pesticides and fungicides. And so I hope, my hope is that everybody's gonna get super stoked. They're gonna wanna have animals, and then they're gonna go out and they're gonna start telling the hay farmers, oh, we don't care if there's a few weeds in the hay. The animals actually love it. We don't care if there's, a diverse amount of plants that are being baled up in these bales, because they through, so much influence of people just wanting a pure grass, go and spend so much time and energy trying to get these weeds out of the field. And then so they're spraying pesticides, they're spraying herbicides, and it's so unnecessary. It doesn't need to happen. And if we create the demand for that kind of hay, then they'll stop poisoning that land. And so that's a lot of work that we do, is talking to hay people around us right now, just being like, give us your weedy bales that you thought no one would want, because those are super valuable to us. And the diversity of plants in the hay helps the animals. They need that. And so we will feed them a hay in the barn. and they waste a lot of it. They eat probably like 50%, and then what we do is we just mulch in the barn, and we just start building up this compost strata in the barn of all the mixed manures, and the chickens are integrated into that as well, and it works out really nice. The chickens, birds and ruminants are such a great combination. They're totally meant to be together. And so the birds come in and they scratch through and they eat larvae, they eat all the fly maggots, and they come in and they're just getting wonderful nutrition coming through the barn and working with that substrate, and they're shredding it, and they're turning it into this great unified medium. And so and then from there we'll let it build up for a certain amount of time, and then it's fermenting and turning, and we clean it out and pile it up, and it moves out onto the fields. It's pretty simple. That's pretty much like the real basis to the system. You want to add?
One thing I would say about that, it's like the barn can become a place where things get really sick and stuff because people aren't managing it. If they're walking on their own poop and it's wet and sloppy in the barn, you have to manage that. And so the really important thing that always comes up for us is you got to mulch everything. If it's raw land that's wet and it's not heightened and the hooves are wet and all that, it becomes a bad scenario to put that many animals in that small a space. But the carbon load is the important thing. And so by keeping it super well mulched, that really is the answer. And we didn't always have chickens in there with it. That was something we just kind of realized because we let the chickens out, and then they all wanted to be in the barn. And then we were like, oh, they actually make the whole barn work better. So we're always learning, and our end goal is definitely not the barn for the animals, right? But we don't buy any outside fertility other than what we feed our animals. So we don't buy the minerals, we don't buy the dusts, we don't amend the lands, we don't do that. We trust, and for our own desire to want to believe in nature and that it will work, we just want to make it happen in the lowest potential fertility place with the least amount of stuff and watch it work. Because then we can dispel all this idea that you or I need to be spending all this money all the time, every year, to reamend. So, we're learning, it's working, and that's the important information. We're not trying to be the most super righteous people that have the answers. We just are dedicated, and our crops are not a huge thing by any means, especially in the development of a farm. And I'm going to talk about that a little more, but important stuff for sure.
Yeah. So then I guess the next part that I wanted to talk about with taking care of animals is, it's the same like what Dawn was saying. I loved Dawn's presentation yesterday, and how he was saying, that you just have to be there. You have to put the time in, and spending time with them and around them is like the best way to know what they need. You just recognize, you get to know them, you get to know how they move and their personality. They all have individual personalities, obviously, and so I think that's a really important thing, is like just putting the time in, grooming them, being around them, and then also just keeping them really healthy as best you can, giving them good food, giving them the ability to be what they are. And I think that it helps them mentally so much. Like, I think there's actually like a lot of mental health problems with animals just because they're forced to be in situations that are, so far from what they evolved to be. And just, yeah. And so, and then also just recognizing what they're doing for you as a filter, because what you're doing is you're putting biomass through them, and they're they're eating it and breaking it down in that like magical biome that they have inside of them, infusing it with microbiology and then shitting it out, and it's just this amazing waste product that you can use. And so you want them to be healthy, because as you're putting that through them, you don't want that to be whatever you're giving them, or that system that they have to be tainted. And so there's a lot of common practice with animal husbandry now that I think, it'd be good for people to just let go of a little bit, which I think just some of the things, like for parasites, like that's definitely one of the main things you need to keep track of, is parasite load in them, and that most people use really harsh chemical wormers to clean their systems out, and that comes through in the poop, and it's really hard on them. Their whole system is based on a really healthy microbiology going on inside of them, and so to put in chemicals that make that, basically act to kill life, it totally sets them back. And so you can definitely mitigate parasites through herbs and giving them the opportunity to groom themselves. Like that's one thing that has been really great. I just take push brooms, and you just like in a post in the barn, you just drill up push brooms, make this like big scrubby post, and they totally just go and just brush themselves, and it helps them with all their external parasites, and they love it. It's the itchy scratchy post. Everybody needs an itchy scratchy post. It totally makes them way happier. And then, if you have to be confined, if they can't be going out into a pasture and getting what they need naturally, which is the ideal, that this animal can go and get its food the way that it was designed to, that a goat can go into the forest and browse and eat the food that it wants to eat. And if you can't do that, and you are confining them in this kind of a scenario, it's just more work for you, because you then take on that burden of bringing them what they need. And so then, it's just, you're going to have to be inputting more into this animal. And so I think the healthiest scenario is that they can go into the forest. They're going into a diverse forest, and they're allowed to choose the plants that they want to eat, and that keeps them so much more healthy. And they definitely choose plants that they need. They'll eat poisonous plants when they need it, and it will help them if they're having some kind of malady. And I've seen it with my oldest goat. She's an amazing browser, and she'll go and she'll sniff the different plants, and she'll totally choose which plants to eat. And then the younger generations of goats watch her, and they learn from her, and she shows them how to eat thistle. And it's just like, it's so awesome just to recognize how intelligent they are, and that they have the ability to completely, find what they need if they have the opportunity to do it. So I think that's the ideal. But then if you can't do that, you're just, spending much more time around them and trying to understand and feed them the things that they need. So want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, it's I think, the most really important thing is you're essentially, you're kind of making an internal contract with animals when you take them on. And some people have this idea, oh, it's kind of mean to put them in these fences, and they want to. Well, I mean, honestly, if you go hang out with the animals, that's not the issue. And they run. If you're doing it right, they're coming to you. They love you. You love them. You're honoring them. They're honoring you in that way, where they're giving you this energy. So, it's like, I think it's just good for us all to think about that. And if an animal, if you're having situations, you're keeping animals, and you don't feel that, you need to start asking yourself why. And it's okay to take care of the things that take care of you. Everybody, I want something that's easy. Well, we have a lot of work to do, and easy is not necessarily the answer. So, take care of your animals. If you get animals, the last thing we want to do is encourage people to go get a bunch of animals, and then people are running around with all these animals, and they're getting out, or they're not having a good scenario to be in. Don't do it until you're ready.
So, well, let's see where we're at. Okay. some of the great things you can obviously utilize. So like we keep a great breed, a heritage breed of sheep, the Icelandic sheep, and we shear them. They're a fiber breed. And if you get sheep, like take that wool and put it in the garden. Like it is incredible. It just melts into the garden and everything loves it. So it's a really amazing mulch. I wanted to make sure that got out there. And also just a note on heritage breed animals. I mean, if you're looking for animals, definitely seek out the heritage breeds. They've got just a strong ability to take care of themselves. They're generally more hardy. They yeah, I think that's a important aspect. Okay, so let's see. Oh, okay. Another great thing is just like growing things for your animals too. Like comfrey is one of the most amazing plants, and mineral deficiencies for animals are definitely something to pay attention to. And comfrey has just an incredible array of trace minerals, and it's a deep tap-rooted dynamic accumulating plant, and they love it. And it's definitely, there's been, lots of controversy around it of whether it should be used internally and whatnot. And it's just silly because it's a magical plant. It's definitely, for the animals, it's a great supplement to feed to them. And we feed it to them in the summer when we have it, and they need it. So grow comfrey for sure if you're keeping animals, and feed it to your chickens. They all want it. So it's a really good plant to incorporate.
So maybe one thing I want to acknowledge is kind of I just want to take a second to acknowledge all the earth-based spiritual people and give them thanks for the work that they've done. I've been influenced by a lot of different cultures who are dedicated to being connected to the earth. And so for all the people that have come here and all the people that see that, I just want to make sure that you get some gratitude, some thanks, and that there's a lot of really important cultures that haven't been being listened to for a long time. And I think it's important that we gain some strength from those cultures at this day, because I think that's where a lot of the answers lie. I can't tell you how much Countryman affected me as a young man. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Countryman, but it was a movie out of Jamaica, and it was amazing. I'll tell you, Countryman was amazing. So yeah, watch Countryman if you haven't,
It's a terrible movie. So good.
The character's great. But anyways, I just wanted to bring it to that before we move into, is it the essence?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the essence. I want to get into some of the really important things that we have to pay attention to when we're farming, and because we don't live like maybe people used to, where they had a lot of access to just extra land. In fact, now we have neighbors that might be really mad at us for doing stuff. And so we have to be careful, and we have to be good, but we also have to make sure that we understand earth care, and we have to understand where we live. And I think there's, cannabis growing shouldn't be focused on so much in the beginning. And I understand that we all have to pay our bills somehow, but you're going to do a lot better in the long run if you take care of the land around you. You're going to set yourself up for not needing to deal with the issues that everybody is talking about all the time, because you're creating the resilience in the natural landscape to be able to grow healthy plants. I am convinced, that people suffer with horticultural issues because they're still acting in the horticultural ways of Western worlds. And once we started doing that, we started bringing in things from far away to add to our land. And I think there's some karmic stuff there. I think you're kind of inviting the problems the more you're outsourcing your stuff. And the more you're outsourcing your stuff, the less connected to the place that stuff is. That stuff can become the place that you're in. And I'm a huge proponent of recycling energies and just understanding what's what, because there is going to be a bag of this laying around if you move to a new farm. You better know what this stuff is, because you got to deal with it. And you don't want to just put everything in a dump and send it to the landfill and think you're doing yourself a good favor of cleaning up the planet. Well, the trash isn't gone. We have to think about dealing with our shit and our trash. And we have to be responsible about how we do that. And so we need to become really good at understanding the water cycle. And our main issue is really, it comes down to water in this day and age. We need clean water. We have to make sure that we stop the practices right now that are polluting the ocean. Everything ends up in the ocean, and that's really important to pay attention to. If you don't look at a map of your own watershed and start to understand what is downstream from you and what is upstream from you, start. That's one of the most maybe important things, especially if you live in the hills. If you live in land with topography and you're not in the flatlands, it's important down there too. It's important to understand the roles of each environment that we are managing, because that's when we can affect it in a positive way. It's working with a bigger system, and we need to be understanding that we're connected to a bigger ecology and that the earth certainly works all together and that we're a part of it. And so watershed, super important. I'm going to get into just like, well, I'll talk right about it. You guys all know the term hugelcultures. I'm so stoked. Everybody's like, I put my hugelculture in. I'm so excited. I did this huge hugelculture project. And I'm like, so great, because what a hugelculture actually is a carbon sink. It's a bioswale, if you will. I mean, we can call it whatever we want. There's a bunch of names, that it can be referred to, but it really is. It's about taking care of the water. It's not about growing the cannabis. The cannabis is a great side benefit, and the cannabis is wonderful, and so are all the other plants that come with it. But all those plants want to be serving a role on this planet too. We all want a job. We all want purpose. The animals want to feel like they're doing something. And so let's give these plants a job outside of just what we want from them. And don't worry, you're going to end up overgrowing everything when you move this direction. The more carbon put into your land, the more it's capable of producing. Your job, once the land is healthy, is to simply walk through the garden and manage the things that want to take over completely and utilize those things as food for the things you don't want to get taken over. So it's really it's creating abundance and then just using the abundance. And you can know that this plant is good at accumulating this nutrient, and you can understand root systems, and that's all really important. And I encourage, and I look into it all the time. But the simplistic mindset just says, without even any of that knowledge, just understand that plants do feed plants. Plants feed animals. Therefore, plants feed us. Any way you look at it, whether you are someone who has we are way into high animal fat diets. We eat a lot of animal fats, and everybody thinks we must be vegetarian or vegan. No, we're super dedicated to the energy of everything. And we're trying to figure out the best way to nourish ourselves so that we can maintain a system that can keep us really healthy and strong, because we have to do a lot of work. And so I'll tell you a little bit about our business structure. It's me, Elizabeth, and my cousin Daniel are the laborers. We pretty much do everything. We hire 1 or 2 people for a couple weeks out of the year. Otherwise, if you guys ever got Greensource gardens, A-grade cannabis at a dispensary, chances are this year I was the one that trimmed it. that's another piece that's really important for people to understand. You really want to make it through the early years and you're struggling in that realm of you owe a lot of money and all this. Well, you got to cut your costs. You got to figure out how to grow things. You got to be willing to work. You know, for someone to be like, I don't do that anymore. Like, that's some kind of privileged scenario. It's like, if you got the opportunity to work, you know, and get your systems dialed before you try to plug somebody in. You're only benefiting everybody by waiting until you're ready. It's really hard with dynamics and a lot of people working in a space to make it efficient for business purposes to actually not fail. So, we spend a lot of time putting that energy in ourselves until we have the structure and the training understanding of every process to help people come in and fit into it. And we're so different in our processing and how we do things everywhere that, it's hard to take people in that already have a lot of experience, because it's really, then we got to really train them out of a lot of ideas that they think are the way, and kind of get them on a different potential. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, just about like, how do you succeed in business? You work really hard. And the other thing that goes with that is the whole passion. It's not even work if you're driven by passion and you're driven by intention. It's not like I'm out there like, oh God, like, this is miserable. It's like, these are our beds in the state that they're in right now, And so, like, I walk out and I'm in the mountains, and it's quiet and I'm pushing poop. I mean, that's the reality. I push poop for months in the winter. Like, I don't have everybody come and get everything done. I'm just like, one day at a time. Let the poop build up in the barn, try and keep it, getting it on the field. The winter time is a time of building fertility in Southern Oregon. Our climate builds fertility as well as loses fertility due to rain, but the way to not lose the fertility is to make sure that the soil life is continually working, and or there's so many roots in the ground, which is definitely combined. In the beginning, we end up heavy mulching. You could see that. We're building huge amounts of fungal component because we're working on a degraded landscape that was covered in forest at one point, and then somebody turned it into a field for horses, and then it obviously wasn't. People just haven't been ecologically minded in rural countries that much, so it just wasn't cared for, and so the field, as it does in the way things work, turns bacterial. These are the places where symphylins, I hear people, we call them symphylins, but maybe it's symphylins, but we deal with symphylins, and I want to talk about that because everything you read about symphylins tells you to do exactly the opposite of what we're doing, and what we're doing is bringing back what the symphylins don't have in a bacterially dominated soil, which is their main food source, fungi. Fungal hyphae is what they eat. Elaine Ingham, I mean, I went into symphylin stuff and reading. I'm always reading, and it's like, do not add any more organic matter, till right before, till hard, all this stuff that's so against what I do. And I usually go and look at what agriculture tells you to do, and I do the opposite. Or I just reconfirm that, hey, you know what? Don't listen to the dogma of agricultural sciences about what you need to do when you have a problem, because there is another solution that's actually better for the land, and that's what we need to be more concerned about right now than quickly fixing the problem, which doesn't, and creates more problems for you in the long term. So we've always used lots of mulch to create this, and we're watching it. Last year we had huge symphylin damage on our first season, which, you want your first season to at least do something, because you got to make it, But we just stuck to it and just kept our practices of just mulching and just being like, God, I mean, I definitely spent time like staring and stressing and, June, July, it was just like, we struggled, it was not easy. And it wasn't the whole field, thankfully. Um, but the things that are the hardest are what teach you the most. And so we come away from it with, and we're not even done, we're really excited to see what happens this year. And with the amount of fungal growth going on underneath, we're really not that worried. Everything's working so much better this year already because of our having been there. Um, and so, you just have to believe and you just have to follow your heart. But Elaine Ingham, there's a thread somewhere, and we're always searching for information on this. And I finally found someone that I resonated with who was like, gave me the information that I was thinking was the situation, which is mulch. And do not disturb and allow the succession to evolve towards a more balanced space. Always increasing diversity. This is super important. And a garden, I'm not like, grow this here and then grow your diversity over here and then take it from there and bring it to the plants you want to grow. No, I'm way into the mindset of the garden doesn't look like a cannabis garden. It looks like a mixed, integrated garden. And the cannabis is usually surrounded by plants that create habitat for the things that protect them. And things like Comfrey provide overwintering homes for so many important predators and so many important things that are needed in the springtime, that we'll harvest the Comfrey a couple of times, but towards the later season, and when we harvest it, we cut it down and put it under the plants and use it as a mulch. But we give it this long growth in the late to create that habitat, especially for late flowering. You want big plants with lots of habitat on the ground. You want peppermint, even though it runs like crazy around, because have you ever looked at peppermint flowers in the summer and how many bugs come to those? You want fennel. Fennel brings all these wasps, these different species of wasps, and you want them right next to your plants. It's one thing, you could plant your little fun garden on the side or whatever and think, that it's, why do I have these problems? Well, everything's over there. And then you've got this whole room is just a canopy of cannabis, but you've got like a nice row of comfrey on the perimeter. And that's better than nothing, but when you put it all in, that's when it works. These things are working together, these things, and if you want resiliency, that is the thing. We grow tier 1, half acre, and we don't use it all for cannabis, though, we plant a lot in it, but we plant everything else too, and this year big. So Symphyllans, anybody deal with it? Okay. The other thing, potatoes. Run a crop of potatoes. We're planting potatoes in the whole hillside. Every single berm is loaded with 2 or 3 rows of potatoes, onions, garlic. We've got comfrey. We've got fava beans in there. And so planting cannabis this year is going to be like, let's get this out of the way and put a pile of compost from the yard and plant over everything, or harvest a few potatoes for breakfast and plant one there, but they find that the Symphyllans don't even, the potato relationship, and we have our own theories about potatoes and what they draw, predatory mites. We just see our potatoes are covered in predatory mites whenever we pull them up. So that tells us that tubers are doing a lot of good thing for the soil. Jerusalem artichokes, we're doing South American stuff, yacon and oca, and all these tubers are just going to let it overgrow these zones, just for the soil's sake. And then whoever thinks that plants can't grow big with other plants around, I mean, it's not true. So let's work on that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think another thing, just to like hammer home, when we first started on the hillside, we'd explore into the soil and see what was there. We definitely saw symphlinds, we saw worms and some springtails, but like really low diversity in the soil for soil life. And so then we made our hugel berms, and we brought all this material to this field that had, really minimal amount of growth going on, compacted. And you can imagine if that amount of soil building were to happen naturally, it would have taken hundreds of years for that amount of soil or that amount of energy to come to that space. And so when you're altering a space like that and you're bringing in that huge influence, you're going to have just this period, and it takes years where just things just start, explosions of life take advantage of all that energy. And so obviously what's existing there to begin with is going to take advantage of it. And so that's what our situation was, that the symphland just exploded in numbers. And it can be really scary, it's just like, you don't, that's like the worst case scenario. You've got your brand new farm and you've done all this back-breaking work, and then you realize that it's gonna be a while before it starts to steady out. And that's like an acceptance piece of just, not freaking out, not spraying a bunch of stuff because you're scared of too many of this or too many of that. And then with time, because you've created all this habitat, and that's pretty much it, just diverse habitat, everything starts to come in. It's if you build it, they will come. It's true. And I don't know where they come from. Now you go and we look through the soil and I see all different kinds of life. You see predatory beetles and crazy millipedes I've never seen before, and just like amazing, out of nowhere, within a year and a few months, they're there. And it's gonna keep evolving. And that's, I think the piece that is just so reassuring right now, to go and compare from last year to this year and just see that it just comes in life, to quote the great Jurassic Park, life finds a way, and it does. It's amazing.
Yeah, and what I'd say about that is it really is the case, And so setting up bioswales and carbon sinks, which are the same thing, or hugelcultures, this is the development of the habitat from the beginning that invites everything that you need for things to be healthy. So we're creating a lot more airspace underneath, a lot more habitat in the soil, under the soil, with these lens of soil over this dynamic structure that creates space for fungus to run through because the branches are aligned. And you don't, in these cases where you set things up like that, you don't need to buy bugs. They all come. That's how it works. Yeah. This is really good, and I always point out, like those trees that people are concerned about, which is a big concern for a lot of people. I think you should understand the process of breakdown with all life. And if you just cut the cedar tree down and use it, it's gonna not promote fungus. It's gonna prevent it from growing right away, but in a year, it's gonna break down. It's gonna be carbon. So we're not saying we use everything. And I think it's more important that we use everything, the stuff we're maybe afraid to use. Just don't use any one thing. Alder's really good with fungus. So if you have cedar, put some alder next to it when you bury it so that you have both potentials existing in the space. But that carbon from the cedar is not invaluable. It's very valuable. You might just want to find a dead cedar, because if it's been dead and rotting for a year or two, you're good. That's carbon at that point. Things that are alive are the things that have their strongest chemistry, and that chemistry works for them while they're living. And like all life, when it dies, it rots. And so the essence of it begins to break down to its most basic components, which is carbon, So we're all carbon. We should just hugel everything, because eventually it's going to make things better. Yeah, are there any other questions? We're definitely on the 15-minute train. We do. The question is, are we inoculating fungi? Yeah, we do some inoculation of fungi. We grow or manage. At this point, we manage mycelial mats. We had another farm where we grew a bunch of Strophoria. So we don't have to buy the Strophoria anymore. But if you're going to buy something to add to the garden, fungi is a good one. Spawn and start to grow it, and especially the Stropharia, the wine caps, or these things. Just because they work really well in complex biology, whereas a lot of mushrooms, they don't function as well with as much of the bacteria that might be involved in the manure-based stuff. But with that said, we inoculate with other healthy soil from our other garden. We inoculate also with stuff from the forest, so fungus from the forest. So we end up with all kinds of different mushrooms. But just simply putting the wood there and the mulch is an inoculation itself. And again, it comes. And so, Coprinus you all are familiar with because it's the inky caps, the things that grow really quick and bleed into black before the day's over. They kind of melt away really quick. But Coprinus is a saprophytic mushroom that definitely is fast at digesting stuff quickly, and that's going to show up. You don't have to buy it unless you want a certain kind of edible Coprinus, which there is. Shaggy mane. So yeah, we do some inoculation, but your best inoculation is good, healthy soil. And I want to get into this too a little bit because I know people understand that the forest makes really good soil, and so we hear, and we do it as well. But we go to the forest and we communicate with the forest about where there's really healthy space, and then when we take from that, we have to make sure we give back. I definitely don't want to give a presentation and everybody's out in the forest shoveling all the best soil out of the forest to put in their gardens, and then not managing that. If you're taking from a place, you're bringing back. And an easy way to do that is to bring mulch back to that spot. Wood chips is the best, just simply because it is the forest. It's generally fungally dominant, and it wants to grow. Those same organisms will just grow into that and make more soil for you. So when you're mining soil from the forest, do it mindfully. Make an agreement with the space that you're taking from. Humans have always seems to be taking so much and not thinking about the consequences of our taking. It's time to think about our consequences of taking, and it's time to take when we need to take. If we feel the need that we have to take, it's time that we start giving back in those scenarios. And don't take too much from any one spot. And understand the complex biologies and micro biologies that are going on and what you're doing with disturbance. Understand disturbance. I really do want to hit on managing watersheds and understanding nutrient-rich materials, and then how that leaches downstream, and making sure that if you're a farm in these scenarios that you're setting up and making plans, if you aren't already, of the runoff that might happen in the wet season. And so really understanding, and Dan Marr's here, and I assume he's going to be getting into this in a little more detail, which is just awesome, because this is really the work that needs to be done. This is the remediation project we need to be working on. The forest health is suffering because roads is draining the blood. And if we managed our roads right, it wouldn't have to drain it out. And people should not be disturbing the ground in the wet season. You shouldn't be like, I have to get this done because it's this, but there's this big rainstorm. and then you go and you scrape, and now you've got a mud pit, and now everybody knows downstream because now the river's running murky when it shouldn't be. The rivers, the streams in a healthy ecology don't run murky unless it's just the greatest catastrophe that was followed, say, a fire or something. But really, the forest is the place to hold the water. All these logging roads are taking that water out quickly. The water table's dropping. We could, with the right practices, be putting our bioswales in, our carbon filters for our nutrients, growing really strong growing plants, which is what cannabis is. Cannabis is a great carbon creator because it grows so fast that it's putting so much carbon in that fast. And so it's a great place to utilize a bioswale. But so is bamboo. Bamboo uptakes nutrients like crazy. So you want to look at plants that grow really fast and have those planted in your carbon sinks so that you're caring for the downstream component. You don't want to be that farm, then there's a lot of them that are making a mess for the people below them, as well as not thinking about the water table and their relationship to the bigger picture. And that's the biggest piece that needs to be focused on. You want to be a good, healthy, regenerative cannabis farm, and you don't have a single bioswale managing any of your off-run nutrients, or you're not paying attention to what your cycle is in the watershed, then you have to start working on that. You know, because that's a huge part of regeneration is water storage. So, are they any other questions before we run out of time here? Yeah.
I'll just do the grain really quick. For the milking animals, I will supplement their diet with grain, and I really recommend anyone who's wanting to source like a really good quality non-GMO organic grain for their animals, which is really important. Azure Standard is amazing. And it's an online marketplace where you can get together with drop groups, and there's several down here in Southern Oregon. And you save so much money on shipping because you get with a group and you put in an order, and they have relationships with great farms all over, and it's really amazing. So I don't know if you've checked that out, but yeah, they have animal food. They have animal grain as well, and it's awesome. Yeah. No, definitely, absolutely. I think that we're constantly experimenting and evolving, and one of the things that we've practiced with a little bit is growing barley and grain kind of in the pathways, and then wanting to basically have our mulch growing in place where we come and we can scythe it down and have it. We can harvest it for grain. We can use it for mulch. But yeah, absolutely, that's definitely one of the goals, for sure. And I think that you don't have to supplement with grain, and it's just I do because right now I don't have a adequate pasture system for them to get everything that they need. So Azure, A-Z, I think U-R-E, azurestandard.com. Check it out.
And then with the noxious weeds, let me hit on the fennel. Umbel plants are worthy to have around. Our job as stewards with anything that's running into this competitive exclusion principle, which is simply something comes and the environment's more advantageous for it and it takes over. Well, our job as stewards of these complex, diverse systems is to manage that. So, you gotta be in the garden, and if things start to get a little out of control, you've got some biomass to mulch with, and understanding how the cycles of reproduction for plants can help you with that process too. So you can start to cut them at the right time if you don't want them to reproduce more. So it's just about paying attention to what is going on with the plants that you do choose to integrate. Because I'm a believer that we're all kind of invasive species, and I think we all belong here. So I think we just have to be really conscious of how the ecology works when we're working with it. Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you what I know about their life cycle or why they are choosing roots and not their normal food. Um, it's not the horse manure. I mean, any organic matter, any good soil is going to encourage the health of a symphylin. But if you don't have fungal component in your soil, they're going to eat roots. But if the fungal component is in your soil, then they eat what they want, which is hyphae. So you have to make sure that most people are way too bacterially dominated, trying to grow the biggest plants they can. And bacteria is that is essentially nitrogen. And the fungus is more of the phosphorus component, calcium creator. And when you're bacterially dominated and you're working with symphylins in your soil, you could even just have a few symphylins and they can devastate. And then you explode a population with their ideal habitat, which is good soil ability to move through the soil. Then you explode your problem if you're not managing to grow fungus. So they want to be in the forest, so make it more like the forest. They don't. I'm not a believer that it's coming in as much as it is there, and then because of the soil that people bring, it can move more freely, and it moves into it looking for food. People are afraid of wood chip compost. Don't be. It's not. These are not what's bringing in certain grasses, and people using the fear of. So many people are so afraid of symphylins, and it's a hard one to deal with. It's not like we haven't suffered from it, but we have to work with them. We can't try to figure out why they're a problem.
Just another thing too, just observationally, when we have added the fungal component to the soil, they're still there. We see them in abundance, but we don't see the damage anymore. So.
Okay. I saw a question over here. No, in fact, we don't flush our plants, and we also don't change our feeding schedule outside of the fact that the season provides different things at different times. And so, in the spring, there's a lot more nitrogen available because plants are young and growing fast, and so they're mostly water. And when you have something that's mostly water, you get a bacterial breakdown component. But as they mature, the stems become stiffer, you get more cellulose, and that encourages more fungal growth. So if you're utilizing the seasons and working with what's available, you don't have to worry about your NPK. NPK, we don't even think about any difference between vegging and flowering. It's the same practices year round, except that the season changes, so what's available is a little different. And if that's available in that season, it's probably supposed to be there for a reason. So, seems to work. I think our can we do that on the panel this afternoon? Because it looks like our time's up. But I would love to address that. Let you know. Yeah, I'm going to be here. Thanks, you guys. Thanks a lot.